Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on TemTem. This is a Pokemon-inspired MMO that is going to be coming out sometime in the near future. I recently had the opportunity to play the alpha on PC, and the developers allowed us to stream it and allowed me to create content on it, which is why we're making this video. It's going to be hitting early access for Steam on the 21st, with a console release coming sometimes when the game fully releases in the future. So before I cover my thoughts on what I experienced, things that could be improved, and things that they definitely nailed, let's talk quickly about business model and some of the other details of the game. First of all, it is going to be a buy-to-play game with a cosmetic cash shop. It is an MMO, so I did expect that to be the business model, if not an outright subscription, but that's just been the way things have been going as of late. No pay-to-win though, only cosmetics in that cash shop. The purchase price is estimated to probably be between the $30 and $40 range. I saw some people throwing around a $35 figure when I was live streaming it, but I'm just gonna wait until it officially announces a price, when we should know soon, because January 21st. The alpha that I played had about 20 hours of campaign story, 76 encounterable TEMs, though not all of them are catchable, and the plan is to have 161 or more of these TEMs by launch. Now, I did say that this was going to be an MMO, which is great because I've wanted something officially Pokemon-inspired for ages in regards to an MMO. But what actually makes it an MMO? And in the alpha I experienced, there were a few things that, are MMO-ish, but a lot of the major things that we would define an MMO by definitely seemed like they weren't all the way there yet. I mean, I could see other trainers in the open world, which is nice. It does feel good to actually feel like I'm part of a living, breathing world while I'm going around catching my TEMs and doing whatnot. There's of course trading, there's battling, both casual and competitive, which we'll talk about in a bit. But quite frankly, probably the best, I guess, MMO feature, it's not really MMO so much, but it is multiplayer, is a co-op mode where you can actually play with a friend, you can party up with somebody, and you can do like the story, for example, co-op. Each trainer sends out one TEM at a time and controls their own TEM. It's really nice to be able to play through the campaign with another person, talk about your experiences, coordinate what you're actually going to be using, cover each other's weaknesses. All those things are great to have access to. Now, there are more MMO-esque features planned for the future. I ran into an NPC that mentioned a housing area. There's, of course, going to be guilds, but I'm still personally in the dark about what they're going to do endgame-wise outside of competitive battles. And in case you're wondering the difference, a casual battle is just everyone picks, a few TEMs and you go at it against each other. A competitive battle actually limits a maximum of 5 TEMs per battle as opposed to the usual 6. And you actually have a pick and ban phase where you can choose to completely ban out TEMs that the enemy can use. So it is a much more strategic feature than the casual mode. But if you just want to battle against friends, that's there too. You don't have to worry about all those rules for that. So now that we've covered MMO-like features, let's talk about the combat itself, because it's traditional turn-based battles using the TEMs that you've caught. Exactly what you'd expect it to be, but in an MMO setting. Battles are 2v2 by default, though of course 2v1s can occur against trainers in the wild who for some reason only have one TEM, or wild TEM battles overall. There is a chance that even the wild TEM battles can be 2v2s as well, but a lot of the time it'll just be 2v1s. It also means you can actually use 2 items per turn, which is especially useful for catching wild TemTems or healing up in a desperate circumstance. The types of the TEMs you can encounter are as follows. There's 12 different ones: neutral, fire, nature, water, electric, mental, earth, wind, crystal, digital, melee, and toxic. Of course, all these TEMs can have subtypes as well, and all the usual applications of weaknesses and resistances apply here, and you can probably figure out a lot of them just by looking at that list. Types can lead to a ×2 or 4 times damage bonus, or a 1/2 to 1/4 resistance against damage. For example, electric attacks will deal 4 times damage to a mental wind type such as Barch, since both of those elements have a 2 times weakness. On the flip side, electric attacks would only deal 1/4 of the damage to a crystal earth type such as Bunbun. Now, one of the big things the TemTem developers are really stressing with their combat is that there is little to, actually they say no RNG, and I really can't dispute it. There's no missing, there's no crits. Status effects always land so long as there are no traits or skills that prevent it or reduce the number of turns. Statuses also remain on the bench for any TEMs afflicted, and even out of battle, though they do wear off after either the set number of turns in battle take place, or even after a certain number of steps are taken to represent, I guess, an open world version of the turns. A big thing is no damage variance in skills. Yes, your skills still take a base amount of damage and put it through the calculation of your special attack and your attack versus enemy defense, but there's no randomness to the damage once it's gone through the calculation. Most people who are used to the main series that inspired this kind of game are familiar with the fact that that normally has like a 0.9 to a 1.1 damage modifier. TemTem doesn't have that. It'll always be after the calculation a 1 times damage multiplier. Will always be a predictable number of damage if you put all the numbers through the calculation. The only place you might not, it's not really RNG because it's calculated out, but the skills have priority stats that are run through speed. And, you know, being able to 100% predict the turn order, there you can to some degree, but it will come down to your speed stat here. I mean, for example, a high-speed Tem using a low or 0 priority attack may still end up attacking after a moderate speed Tem using a very high priority skill. It's all calculations that set these things into motion. So as long as you have the numbers, you can 100% say who will get the turn, what order it'll take place in, how much damage it will deal. No RNG in pretty much any of those aspects. As for your actual Tems in battle, they have 4 skills. Again, something most of us would come to expect. Now, while you can only have 4 skills per TemTem in battle, every skill a TemTem can or has learned in their life cycle can be freely retaught in your party menu. You don't have to choose to permanently remove a skill, and if you replace a skill and you find your new skill just isn't doing it for you, you can just go to the party menu and put the old skill back on. For this reason, TCs, which are items that are used to teach new skills, are also unlimited once you find them through various quests or in a treasure chest. These just add to the pool of infinitely relearnable skills for any applicable TemTem. One thing with a little bit of randomness, though not so much in the early game, is traits. Each TemTem has a trait that changes the way they operate in battle. There's a pretty wide range of them, from status immunities to boosts to specific damage types. A personal favorite of mine is Bully, which, so long as you have more alive TemTems in your party lineup across all 6, any Tem with this trait will deal 30% more damage on all of their skills. It's great for PvE since you run into so many trainers that have less than 6 Tems, and it's good in a PvP match for snowballing if you happen to be winning. Another big difference in the combat is the stamina system. So again, the franchise that inspired this type of game, we're used to having a set number of skills in battle through the stat PP. Now, instead in TemTem, abilities have stamina values. When using a skill, it will reduce your Tem's stamina gauge by that amount, with the Tem gaining back some stamina per turn. Now, if you overspend stamina, your Tem will actually take recoil damage based on how much stamina you overspent by. Overspend by 1 stamina, and your Tem will expend all of its remaining stamina and then lose 1 health after taking their turn. Expending all your stamina also stuns them for their next turn, though even on a stunned TemTem's turn, you can still choose to wait, which is an action that allows you to restore more stamina per turn. You can swap Tems, or you can even use items. There are also combat items and skills that restore stamina. Another big difference is holds. Now, some skills can only be used every certain number of turns, and these are referred to as hold skills. A skill with a 1-turn hold, for example, can be used on the 2nd turn in battle, while a 3-hold skill can be used on the 4th turn in battle. After you use one of these hold skills, it will take that many turns to recharge. Now, these skills do also have stamina costs, and honestly, most of them have pretty high stamina costs because you're usually waiting for a really strong skill to use it. Holds do accrue on the bench, however, so in the case of that 3-hold skill, if you were to swap that Tem in on the 4th turn of that battle, they would have access to the skill immediately. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is really more for the hardcore player. These are single and training values, also called SVs and TVs, and these are used in the calculation to determine stat growth. Again, the system is largely for hardcore players, so if you're a casual player, you might pay attention or see these stats in game, but you may not worry about them nearly as much. First up, we'll talk about TVs. Now, these can be controlled by the player by fighting wild TemTem or by feeding specific items to your TemTem that can either raise or lower the specific values. The max value for a single TV is 500, and the max total across the entire TemTem is 1,000. So you'll generally want to stock up on items and fight the correct battles to manipulate these values in your favor early in the TemTem's life cycle, but we'll talk about that in a bit. SVs, on the other hand, cannot be manipulated and are instead set when a TemTem is born or captured. The maximum value is 50, but there is no limit on how many of these can be maxed. So theoretically, you could have a TEM that has every stat with a perfect SV. These can be seen on the capture menu before choosing to keep or release a TEM. So if you're hunting for specific SVs, you can have all that info you need to know immediately to determine if you're going to keep it or not. Now, an important feature for anyone looking to actually involve themselves with SVs is breeding. Yes, you can breed TEMs of the opposing genders at breeding centers to attempt to get ideal SVs and traits. Breeding simply requires two opposing gender TemTems that have one type in common, such as both having a fire type. Once left at the breeding center, it takes approximately 25 real-time minutes for an egg to be produced, and anywhere from 5 to 45 minutes of the egg being in your party list before it hatches. This time depends on what the average capture rate is of one, so ones that are generally harder to capture take longer, and ones that are really easy to capture are usually pretty quick to hatch. Now, the hatched TemTem will always be level 1 and the first of the evolutionary line of the mother in particular. It will also have 0 TVs across the board, making it the perfect candidate to freshly manipulate these values before it gains any levels. Keep in mind though that TemTems can only be bred a certain number of times before they actually go sterile, displayed as a tree in their detail menu. The offspring will inherit the lowest fertility level between its parents and after the egg is produced, meaning if the parent became sterile from that last breed, the hatched TemTem will actually also be sterile. As for the stats inherited, there is a 40% chance of inheriting the highest SVs from the parent, a 40% of it being an average of the parent's SV, and a 20% chance of matching the lowest SV from a parent. Techniques that it learns are usually a mix of the parent's available skills and traits or randomly generated upon hatching. Now, we're not entirely done talking about breeding because next we get to talk about Lumas. Lumas are the shiny equivalents of TemTems, where a TemTem can occasionally be found just shiny in a different color. Currently, every wild TemTem or bred TemTem has roughly a 1 in 6,000 chance of being a Luma. When breeding, if one of the parents is a Luma, the egg has a 1 in 600 chance of being a Luma as well, and if both parents are Lumas, then there's a 1 in 60 chance the offspring will be a Luma. Now, Lumas aren't just for show in this game. They always come with 3 maxed SVs at minimum, so the odds of them being competitively viable or even just a strong party option is quite a bit higher. It also makes them ideal for breeding, both in terms of producing more Lumas or having better odds at getting good SVs for the child. However, something I failed to mention when I was talking about breeding the first time is the more great SVs you have, the lower the fertility is on the TemTem. I believe if you have over 45 in an SV, then a TemTem will actually have less times that it's able to breed. So Lumas, while they have a guaranteed amount of high SVs, also will have less opportunities to breed before they go sterile. It's important to recognize, especially among anyone looking to be competitive and to do a lot of breeding. Now, I've covered a lot of the core systems of the game, but of course, there's routes for you to run across. There's things like, getting a surfboard to cross the water, or climbing gear to climb up rocks, or certain things to traverse gaps. There's all sorts of ways to get around, and there will also eventually be the ability to mount certain TemTems to get around a little bit faster. There is, of course, as I mentioned, a campaign which will take you through several islands with several different sets of TemTems for you to capture, as well as dojos which have boss fights at the end of them, and of course, a devious evil group that you'll have to deal with at a far too young age. I gotta say, it took me just about the estimate they gave me of 20 hours to get through the campaign, and man, was I having so good of a time. It's just hard to stop because the animations, the story, everything flows at a pretty, crisp pace, even for someone who's kind of just playing casually. And especially being able to play with a friend and have that experience together with somebody else is something that's very, very valuable about this game. So even though a lot of the more MMO features aren't there, even just that ability alone is something that is incredibly welcome. As for actual feedback, I had a few bugs in the alpha, but not nearly as many as I was expecting to have. One of them I crashed upon going into a battle, but I actually learned from that when I reconnected to the game, it just put me back into the battle that I was actually crashed on. So if that had been like a Luma, for example, I still would have been able to participate in that battle. So it was nice to it was almost like a good bug because I got to see that the game even worked that way in the first place. I did also once have all of my controls lock up, and there were a few string errors or display bugs, but nothing too game-breaking outside of the two that I named at first. And even those had some sort of backup that made it really not so bad to crash in those situations. But as for the actual design, the content, the animations, while there's certainly some things that look like they're still working on them, I was overall pretty impressed with the majority of things. I wasn't too keen to some of the early designs that I encountered, but the mid to later portions of the alpha had some great designs, even for first evolutionary versions, that I think a lot of people are going to like. And if they can keep that up after the initial 76 that we've seen and keep going as we approach the other like 100-ish that they're still working on, there's a lot to look forward to. There are also all sorts of other things that I didn't get into in this video. Of course, equipped items, gear items that you can give your TemTem, like a held item, so it has some sort of other effect in battle. There's also mimetics, I think they're called, where mimetics, where like you can have a certain mon. It's almost like an Eevee mon, and if you take it to a specific type of shrine, its evolved form will take on that element. The only one I got to, I guess, experience was 2Y, who became 2Pine, which was a crystal version of his evolved form. And there's all sorts of other things, like lots of little things, but there's a lot of great detail here. And the only thing that I'm going to struggle with is the fact that when it releases in early access, I will know what to do, and I'll probably get through it really quick, and then I'll be waiting on updates. That's always the struggle with early access games, waiting for updates. But if you're someone who wants to see it for yourself, you want to check it out for yourself, there is going to be stress testing in the coming days after I release this video before early access. So if you sign up for that in the description, then you can always try it out for free, although if it is a stress test, so if it breaks, you know, just bear that in mind. Or you can try it out on the 21st by buying the early access on Steam. Either of those things work, but I do hope to see the game continue to grow, continue to implement new features, and continue to just show us the quality product that I really experienced. I'm really, really excited to see where this game goes in the future, and I'll be keeping you up to date on the various updates. I also do have some other videos coming out, but this is all alpha information, so it is all subject to change during early access as they update the game, as they fix things, as they rebalance things, as they add new features. There's so many things that we probably have to talk about that, you know, this video may be largely outdated, or those videos may be largely outdated by the time we get to them. But it still couldn't hurt for early access to give people some advice on the early islands, gear items that you definitely want to grab, especially the EXP share, and the various quests that you can find. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up in this video. Hopefully you enjoyed my little thoughts on TemTem. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And keep an eye out, because when this releases on the 21st, I will be doing some live streams, and if there's any sort of updates or videos that we can do on that, then I am going to be doing those as necessary. So thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, take care.